Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing great. So in this video tutorial I'll be going over your assignment 3, which is on designing a consistent hashing based distributed hash table. So as you've already covered this in your lectures 18 and 19. So I'll start with the introduction. So distributed hash table are basically decentralized storage system which are used to store plenty of files on different nodes. So you have a network constructed out of different machines. Each of machine is called node, and you want to store different files on those nodes, and you want to store them in such a way that you want to basically the purpose of this is to basically balance load on the whole system, right? So DHTs or distributed hash tables are much similar to your standard hash tables. In this assignment, you'll be using a technique called consistent hashing to construct DHT. So basically, there are many different techniques to construct a DHT. We'll see two of them here, which will also help us see how consistent hashing is uh, actually very good, right? So this is a this is an article I've added. It's linked to the manual as well. You can go through it. I'll cut to the chase and go to an example of uh, distributed hashing to see how consistent hashing why do we need consistent hashing. So one way to construct a DHT is that we use a simple hash function. For example, the one being used here. So uh, let's say that we have some servers S1, S2, and S3. Uh, each of them has an ID. For example, S1 has an ID 0, S2 has an ID 1, and similarly S3 has an ID 2. And we want to store these emails on these servers, right? And we want to store some emails on, for example, S3, some emails on S1, and some on S2. And DHT is one way to basically uh, distribute these emails on the servers, right? So we'll use this function to hash these emails to servers. For example, uh, if I hash this email john@example.com, I get hash 89, and then I take its modulo with n, where n is the number of servers. I have 3 servers, so when I'll take 89's modulo with 3, I'll get 2 in remainder, and then I know that this email is going to be hashed in server 3. Similarly, this email will be hashed to S1, uh, and so on. So let's see what is the problem with this technique, right? So the issue arises when we want to add a node or we want to remove a node. So let's say if I want to remove S3 from this DHT, what will happen is that we'll have to rehash all of these emails again. This is because now, since one of the nodes have left, our n has reduced from 3 to 2. So no, ideally what we would want is that we only hash uh, these keys again, the keys that were on S3, but we'll see that we end up hashing other keys as well. Like, for example, smith@example.com was initially hashed to S2. We would ideally want that it remains on S2 because S2 is still in our DHT. But now what happened is that smith@example.com has been hashed to S1. So basically, the as you can see, the problem here is that uh, since in real world scenarios we have systems where we constantly face node failures. So failure are basically a commonplace in real world system. So what we want is that we want to reduce the cost of these failures. In this particular example, uh, example, whenever a node fails, or even when we want to add more nodes to DHT, we'll have to hash all our keys. If we have n keys are cost would be in order of n, right? So we want to reduce that, and ideally, as I said, what we want is that only the keys for the node that is basically leaving the system, we would want that only those keys are rehashed. For example, in this for example, here we would want that we only rehash John at example.com or Adam at example.com. So one way to do this is through consistent hashing. So if you see this diagram, what happens in consistent hashing is that we map all our nodes on a circular ring. So this ring basically starts from this ring is nothing but like a simple layout. We start from 0 and then we build up to a big number uh, in parts of 2, uh, much like this is like your standard clock, wall clock. So here is 0 and then we build up to some big number here, 2 raised to power 32. Here in your example it would be 2 raised to power 16. So we hash each of our node s1, s2 and s3, and we get some number. For example, for s1 we get 0, so we'll place s1 on this part of the ring. For s2 we'll get, let's say, some big number. If this number, let's assume this ring is of size 32, it goes from 0 to 0 up till 32. So s2 would get, for example, an ID of 15, or and s3 would get an ID of, let's say, 21, right? So we'll place these nodes on a circular ring like this, and then we'll place files, right? Files or keys, right? So I'll hash bob at example.com with same hash function, and I'll get let's say value of a hash value of 10, and for market example, let's say I get a hash value of 12. So I'll lay that out on this ring as well. So now what we can say that s2 is responsible for this space between from s1 up till s2, right? So these emails, mark at example.com and bob at example.com, come into the share of s2. Similarly, this space belongs to s3 and this space will belong to s1. Now let's see what happens when a node wants to leave, right? If s3 wants to leave, what would happen is that we'll simply this whole space would now be shared, will come into the share of s1, right? So only these keys will have to be transferred to s1. Nothing would happen to any key on this space which was the part of s2. Similarly, if I want to add a new node, for example, if I wanted to add s4 in this system of DHT, and let's say s4 comes right here. Now nothing would happen to these keys, only alex at example.com would be hashed to s4, which lies here in the ring. So as you can see, now we've significantly reduced the cost of a node joining or leaving the DHT. So this is what consistent hashing is, and this is what you will be implementing in this assignment, right? So you can refer to lecture 18 and lecture 19 slides on LMS, and sir have also uploaded recorded lectures on YouTube as well, so feel free to go through them as well. I've also added these extra resources, please feel free to go through them as well. These articles actually go into a little bit of extra detail. They talk about virtual nodes. You can look at it definitely, but since you will not be implementing them in this assignment, so that's not compulsory. Okay, so moving on to the provided code part. So you've been provided with two files. dht.py is the file you'll be writing your implementation in, and then you can use check.py to test your implementation. So if you look at dht.py file, it asks you to implement different functions of node class. So node is basically these s1, s2 and s3 in this ring. You'll be writing implementation for these nodes, and by writing that implementation you'll see how it builds this ring like structure. So in the constructor of node, you these properties will be initialized. Host of the port, host of the node, host and port of the node. Then m and n are responsible for uh, determining the size of the ring. Key is the hashed value of node. So you can we have provided you with a hasher function. Hash function, you can use this uh, hash function to calculate hash of a node as well as file. This is the format. You can this is the signature of this function. You can call it for node this way and for a file this way. So each node now stores two pointers. These two pointers are what constructs this ring-like structure. So it stores the immediate successor, which would be uh, wait a minute, it stores the successor and the predecessor. So successor is the immediate node if we go in the clockwise direction. For example, for s1 the immediate node in clockwise direction is s2, so we'll store pointer to s2, and predecessor is the node right behind it, so first node in anti-clockwise direction. For s1 this would be s3. So each in initialization of node you store these two pointers. Next node's address, its host and port and predecessor. Then you also store files. You also have an array to store files for, which will fall in this nodes here, and then also backup files. Backup files are used for supporting failure tolerance in our system. Then you have these four functions. These will the all five of these will be used for in the testing. So when we'll call join, we'll expect these things to happen. When we'll call leave, we'll expect test cases expect these things to happen. We'll go into details of these in just a while, like what happens when a node wants to join or what happens when a node wants to leave. Similarly, put and get. So we've also given you these few helper functions. You're welcome to write uh, more helper functions as you need them. Um, you'll use hash this function, hasher function, for calculating hash. You cannot use any other function for this. Then one important thing is that all the communication between the nodes will be happening using sockets. So you cannot call another nodes, for example put or get functions directly. All this communication between nodes will happen through sockets, TCP sockets. So if you look here, we've already provided you with the listener function. What it basically does is that it listens for incoming connections, and then for each connection it receives, it spins a thread of handle connection. You can write handle connections implementation as you wish, but you should not change this listener function at all. I have allowed you to change signature of handle connection. That is, you can update this part, but even this is not necessary. Okay, we've also given you two more utility function, send file and receive file. Since in this DHT based system you'll be uh, implementing a system for sharing actual files between nodes, so you're going to need these functions. So send file basically takes as argument a socket object, a TCP socket object, and a file name, and then it sends that file to this socket. File name would be the complete path of that file. Similarly, receive file also takes similar arguments, and then it receives this file from the socket. So for example, if you want to send a file from node A to node B, you'll call send file on node A and pass node B's a socket for node B's connection, uh, and then you'll call receive file at node B and pass a socket for node A's connection, and these two functions need to be called simultaneously for the file transfer to happen. Okay, so moving on to implementation. So first thing you need to do in is initialization of node. So when the constructor node is called, this thing is called, uh, basically node object is set up, a node object that does not point to anything, that does not have any successor or predecessor yet, because that will be set up during the join part. So basically what happens in initialization is that these two pointers, successor and predecessor, will point to the node itself, its own host and port. So this is like a free mark to you. Okay, so this is the initialization would be basically setup of a node object, and then we'll call join to actually join function. When we'll call join function, that's when the node will become part of the THT. So before I jump into the details of join, it would be really helpful for you that you implement a lookup function, because you'll be needing that lookup function in put and get as well as join, so it will be reused again and again. So it will be a good idea to implement it first. So what I mean by a lookup function is that if, let's say, I want to find that where would in this ring, where would uh, key 7 lie, right? So I can ask this node to look up for key 7. It will ask its successor, which is 4, whether key 7 lies in its key space, since 7 does not lie between 1 and 4. So it will pass on the query to its own successor, which is 8, and then 8 would see that 7 should ideally lie between itself and its predecessor. So node 8 is basically responsible for the key 7. So this is what I mean by a lookup function. So when join is called on a function, it's passed address of a node that is already in the DHT. So you'll connect with that node using this joining address and ask it to do a lookup for your successor. So for example, if node 12 wants to join this system, it will ask any of these nodes to look up for its successor. So for example, it will ask 4 to look up for its successor. So 4 will run a lookup query, and it will find out that 1 would be the successor of 12. So it will return the address of 1. So this is why we need a joining address. So after getting getting the successor, the node this node will let its successor know that it is now the new predecessor of that successor node. So earlier predecessor of 1 was 8. Now 1 will update its predecessor to 12. If you see here, initially the predecessor of this node is not set yet, it is pointing to itself. So now how will 8 know that its successor has been updated? Because now in this ring, 8 needs to point to 12. So for that you need to implement another function, which would be for pinging, right? So what happens in pinging is that 8 will continuously ask its successor whether its predecessor does has been updated or not. So as you can see here, 8 will ask 1 what's your predecessor. 1 will tell 8 that it's 8. So it has not been updated yet. This will repeat every 0.5 second. So let's say now 12 has joined, and 1 has updated its predecessor pointer here. So now when 8 will ask one what's your predecessor, it will tell that now it has been updated to 12. So 8 can now point to 8 can now point to 12, and 8 will now let 12 know that uh, 8 is predecessor of 12. So 12 will update its predecessor pointer as well. So this is what happens in uh, this is what happens when join is called. Now you need to be careful about a few base cases. For example, in the case of only one node in the ring, uh, in that case the node's successor and predecessor will be itself. So that means it does not need to be updated. So in that case, in the case of a system with single node, joining address that you've been given would be an empty string. So that's how you know that your system has just one node. Also, another base case is of two nodes. In case of a two node system, uh, if let's say we had 1 and 8 in the system and node 4, uh, one's successor as well as predecessor would be 8, and similarly 8's successor and predecessor both would be 1. So these are the two base cases that you need to handle as well. We have separate test cases for both these base cases as well as the general case. So the test cases will make you implement all these cases. Next thing is put and get. So now that we know that our this DHT can scale up, we can add any number of nodes. Now it's time to add files to it, similar to what we did in join. For and I can call like uh, put on any of these nodes. I can ask one to put a certain file on the system. So one will calculate its hash first, and then it will find its appropriate place using the lookup function, which I've recommended you guys to implement before you get into join, put and get. So uh, that node would look up for uh, that file's successor and then transfer that file to that uh, to that particular node. So you can use here send file and receive file function. So one thing to keep in mind is that you have to store these files in directory corresponding to that node. We have create the node initialization part creates the directory for each of these nodes. So you will have to save uh, any file you get, either it's the original file or backup file. You have to store that in this directory. You can simply pass the path correctly to receive file and it will store it there. Okay, so now when the get function is called, similar to put it, I can call get on any of these nodes. That node would perform a lookup for the hash of that file. For that file, basically it will hash that file name to get a key, and then it will look up where that key lies on the system, and then it will find the responsible node, and then it would ask if that node has the file or not. If that node has the file, then you'll receive it again, and this time you'll receive it in the main directory for the test cases to pass. In case the file does not exist on that node, you'll return null. Perfect. So here is how file placement works. If you have this system of nodes, this DHT of nodes, as you can see that 4 is responsible for this space, so it has 2 and 3, the files with key 2 and 3. 1 has files with key 10, 12 and 1, since they lie in this space, right? So after having implemented join, put and get, next thing we need to do is that we need to make a small change in join. So earlier the implementation we did for join was simply setting up this ring. It wasn't accounting for the files. For example, if a new node joins here, let's say a node with key let's say 11 joins here, it needs to get its share of files from 1, right, which would be 10. So it needs to get those files. So this is what you need to do here in the file transfer on join byte for this test case to pass. Okay, so after this, the next thing you need to do is implement leave function. So let's see what happens when a function needs to leave. So if, let's say, 4 wants to leave, it will let its predecessor know that it wants to leave, right? So 4 would also tell its predecessor, its successor, right? 4 would give the address of 8 to 1 so that it can update its address, update its successor pointer. So the second thing that need to happen before leave concludes is that these files need to be placed on appropriate node. Now this space uh, would belong to 8, right? So these files will need to be forwarded to 8. Okay, I've basically given this answer now. So finally we have the failure tolerance part. So as we know that failures are commonplace in real world system, so we need to keep that in mind while we construct a distributed system. So there are two things basically that you need to do over here. The first thing is that you need to be able to detect a failure in the system, and then secondly you need to basically revert that failure or maintain certain state in advance so that you can recover from that failure. So by failure, what we mean here is that a node goes down without telling its predecessor that it is leaving. So for example, if we did not have failure tolerance in this DHT, if 4 went down, these 2 and 3 files will be lost. So we do not want that. So we will be incorporating failure tolerance in our system. So how do we detect a failure? First of all, as we've already seen that a node keeps pinging its successor. We saw that in while implementing join. So we can use that for basically detecting a failure. So let's say 8 is pinging 1 and getting its status. If 1 does not respond, let's say 3 times, we can take that as a signal that 1 has failed. So that is how we detect the failure. Now we need to update 8's successor pointer so that 8 points to 4, and for doing that we needed to have that state already present in it, right? It already needs to know that if 1 fails, what is the next immediate node that it can call its successor, which is 4. So usually in DHTs or distributed systems, uh, there are each node maintains a list of n next successors, so that if any of k out of next n nodes goes down, it can call k plus 1th node its successor. Over here we'll simplify our equation and we'll simply store second successor, right? So after immediate successor, we'll have another pointer for the second successor. So if 1 goes down, we can call 4 as our next successor. So that is how we'll update these pointers. The next thing that we need to uh, account for after a failure or recover is to recover the lost files. So for example, as we were talking earlier, that if 4 goes down, we do not want that 2 and 3 files are lost. so we need to back this up in advance. So you can either back them up on successor, or you can either back them up on predecessor. That's up to you, and there are trade-offs in either case, so you need to figure out which is less costly operation. So uh, that detail is left up to you. uh, so you need to argue at the start of your dht.py file what strategy you used and why. Okay, so this was the assignment. Now I'll show how we can test how you can test your file. So we've given you check.py file. You're welcome to look at these test cases and see what's going on, but you're not allowed to change it, obviously. So let's see how you can test your file. So for testing you need simply need Python 3, and then you can simply call this command. You'll pass a port. Port needs to be between 1065,536. I'll run the file here. Okay, so it needs port number to work. It takes a couple of minutes to conclude. You can see we've all covered all these test cases. Great. I'll also run a solution here so that you can see what happens when you will have implemented the assignment. Okay, so this was the assignment. I'll also conduct a Zoom session for Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us on campus feed, or also please utilize our office hours as well. I'll also dedicate one session for Q&A for this assignment. Okay, bye.